During family dinner, Dad said, "We're selling your research. It's now worth $1 billion. My name is Grace, a 28-year-old quantum physicist with nothing but a cramped lab and impossible dreams." When my breakthrough finally came, my father laughed across our family dinner table. "Your little experiment is worthless," he declared, sliding papers for me to sign away my rights. He never believed a daughter could achieve what brilliant men couldn't. What he didn't know was that my phone was silently buzzing with news that would change everything. Let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had someone underestimate your potential. Trust me, what happened next is worth sticking around for. I grew up in Brookfield, a quiet suburb outside Chicago where autumn turned our maple-lined streets into rivers of gold each October. Our ranch-style home on Cedar Drive stood like my father's expectations, solid, unchanging, and built to last. Robert Mitchell, my father, had carved his construction empire from nothing, transforming a small contracting business into one of Illinois' largest commercial builders. He wore success like his pressed khakis and polo shirts, carefully measured and always on display. "Business is predictable, Grace," he'd say during our Sunday pot roast dinners. "You invest, you build, you profit. Science is for dreamers who never make real money." My mother, Linda, had once been a promising CPA at a downtown firm. She'd surrendered her career ambitions long ago to become the supportive wife my father expected. She managed our household with the same precision she'd once applied to corporate balance sheets. Her quiet compliance with my father's dismissal of my interests became its own kind of betrayal over the years. "Listen to your father, Grace," became her constant refrain, spoken so often I wondered if she remembered having her own thoughts. My fascination with quantum physics began when I was 10. My fifth-grade teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, brought a prism to class and showed us how white light contained every color of the rainbow. While other kids saw pretty colors, I saw questions. What made light behave that way? How could something be both a particle and a wave? I devoured every physics book our local library had, sitting cross-legged on my bedroom carpet, surrounded by equations I couldn't yet understand but somehow felt connected to. For my first science fair in 6th grade, I built a basic double-slit experiment using cardboard, aluminum foil, a laser pointer, and my dad's measuring tape. While classmates made baking soda volcanoes, I was demonstrating light interference patterns. The judges, 2 science teachers and our principal, stood stunned as I explained concepts most high schoolers hadn't mastered. "Where did you learn all this?" asked Mr. Henderson, the head judge. "Books," I answered simply. I won first place. My father missed the ceremony for a client meeting. High school transformed from the typical teenage social maze into stepping stones toward my growing obsession. While classmates attended football games and house parties, I volunteered at Northwestern University's physics lab, taking 2 buses each Saturday morning to clean equipment in exchange for watching graduate students conduct experiments. Professor Janet Miller, the first female physicist I'd ever met, noticed my dedication. "You don't just want to watch, do you?" she asked one day. After catching me studying a quantum entanglement setup, she began letting me assist with data collection, treating me as a colleague rather than a high school volunteer. The divide between my family's expectations and my academic interests grew deeper each year. When college acceptance letters arrived, Stanford offered a full scholarship based on my advanced physics projects. My father's response cut deep. 4 years wasted on theories that won't put food on the table, he said, pushing aside my acceptance letter to show me brochures for business schools. Northwestern's business program has a legacy track. My donations could get you in the door. "I want Stanford," I insisted, one of the few times I directly opposed him. "Then you're on your own," he replied. I left for Palo Alto with 2 suitcases and determination that hardened my resolve through 4 challenging years. The sprawling California campus felt like stepping into another world, one where curiosity was currency and impossible questions were just puzzles waiting to be solved. I graduated summa cum laude, my parents attending the ceremony with tight smiles and minimal congratulations. My decision to pursue a PhD rather than join the real world, as my father put it, further strained our already fragile relationship. My doctoral focus became quantum entanglement applications, specifically how entangled particles might revolutionize computing and secure communications. Most established professors dismissed my proposals as too theoretical, too ambitious, or simply unlikely to yield practical applications. "Quantum computing is 20 years away and always will be," one advisor chuckled at his overused joke. But I saw something others missed. Through meticulous experiments and mathematical modeling, I began developing a theory that quantum entanglement could be stabilized at room temperature under specific conditions, something the scientific community considered nearly impossible. If proven true, it would eliminate one of the biggest barriers to practical quantum technology. Just like at home, I grew accustomed to being underestimated. And just like at home, I used that underestimation as fuel. My research lab wasn't impressive, a converted storage room in the physics building's basement with outdated equipment and fluorescent lighting that hummed constantly. The university had assigned me the space almost as an afterthought when other doctoral candidates received newer facilities upstairs. Yet within those dingy walls, something extraordinary was taking shape. I'd covered one wall with whiteboards, my equations sprawling across them in what visitors called beautiful chaos. My desk overflowed with journals, printouts, and components for experimental apparatus that I often built myself for modified electronics when grant money couldn't stretch to professional equipment. Professor Daniels was the only faculty member who didn't dismiss my theories outright. A veteran physicist nearing retirement, he had the freedom that comes with an established career to support unconventional research. They laughed at Einstein too, you know, he told me during one of our weekly meetings, his eyes twinkling behind thick glasses. Not that I'm comparing you to Einstein yet. His encouragement kept me going through failed experiments and rejected grant applications. While other doctoral candidates collaborated in groups, I worked mostly alone, refining my approach to quantum entanglement stabilization through hundreds of minor adjustments and countless late nights. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday at 2:15 in the morning. I'd been running variations of the same experiment for 72 hours straight, sleeping on the lab couch in 3-hour increments. My modified apparatus, part quantum computer, part superconducting circuit, had been producing inconsistent results all week. But this time, something changed. The entangled photons maintained their quantum state for 8.4 seconds, orders of magnitude longer than any previous record. I checked and rechecked the measurements, certain I'd made an error. When the third test confirmed the results, I sat back in my chair, heart pounding. "Oh my God," I whispered to the empty lab. "It's actually working." What I'd theorized was actually happening. The quantum bits were maintaining their entangled state at room temperature using my specialized containment field. If scaled up, this technology could revolutionize everything from computing to secure communications to medical imaging. I called Professor Daniels at 4 a.m., not caring about the hour. "Grace," he answered groggily. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," I said, my voice shaking with excitement. "Everything's right. Can you come to the lab?" He arrived 45 minutes later in mismatched clothes, his white hair uncombed. I showed him the data, explained the experimental modifications, and ran the test again while he watched. When the results appeared on screen, confirming stability once more, he removed his glasses and wiped his eyes. "This is it," he said simply. "This changes everything." Over the next week, we repeated the experiment with variations, documenting every aspect methodically. The results held. What I discovered wasn't just an incremental improvement, it was a fundamental breakthrough that could make practical quantum technology a reality years ahead of predictions. Professor Daniels insisted we meet with the university's technology transfer office immediately. "You need to patent this before someone else figures it out," he urged. "This isn't just academic anymore. This has serious commercial potential." The meeting with Technology Transfer Director Martin Weber was my first glimpse into how the world might respond to my discovery. He listened to our explanation, reviewed our preliminary data, and immediately called in 2 colleagues. "If this works at scale," he said after our presentation, "we're talking about revolutionary applications. Communications, medicine, national security, finance. Every industry that requires computing power or secure data would be interested." "How interested?" Professor Daniels asked pointedly. Weber exchanged glances with his colleagues. "Potentially billions if the patents are properly structured." The word billions seemed abstract, theoretical, like the quantum states I'd been studying. I couldn't quite connect it to my work in that basement lab. "We need to move quickly," Weber continued. "I'll have our legal team draft provisional patent applications. In the meantime, absolute confidentiality is essential." As I left the meeting, clutching a folder of non-disclosure agreements and preliminary patent documents, a strange thought occurred to me. For the first time in my life, my father might actually be impressed by my impractical scientific pursuits. I called my mother that evening, something I rarely did, since our conversations usually centered on why I wasn't visiting more often or when I planned to settle down. "Mom," I said when she answered, "I've made a breakthrough with my research. It's really important. I'd like to come to dinner this Sunday and tell everyone about it." "That's nice, dear," she replied distantly. "Your father's been asking when you'll visit. I'll make your favorite meatloaf." The drive to my parents' house that Sunday felt different. Instead of the usual dread, I felt a glimmer of hope that finally, my family might see value in my work. I brought copies of the preliminary data and patent applications, nearly forgetting Professor Daniel's warnings about confidentiality in my eagerness to share my achievement. Little did I know the dinner ahead would shatter that hope more completely than I could have imagined. Sunday dinners at my parents' house followed the same ritual since childhood. 6 o'clock sharp, formal dining room. My mother's good china set out perfectly even though we were just family. My father would sit at the head of the table, my mother to his right, always ready to refill his glass or fetch something from the kitchen before he even asked. I arrived 15 minutes early, the folder of research documents tucked under my arm. My brother Jake's Honda Civic was already in the driveway. 2 years younger than me, Jake had followed our father's preferred path, getting a business degree from Northwestern and joining the family construction company. His willingness to fulfill our father's expectations had always cast my academic rebellion in starker contrast. "Grace," my mother greeted me at the door with a quick hug. She smelled like rosemary and garlic. "You look tired. Are you sleeping enough?" Before I could answer, Jake appeared in the hallway. "The prodigal scientist returns," he said with a smirk. We'd been close as children, but his loyalty to our father had created distance between us over the years. "Good to see you too," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. Today wasn't about old tensions. Today was about sharing my success. My father emerged from his home office last, greeting me with a perfunctory kiss on the cheek. "Grace, you've lost weight. Your mother will fix that tonight." We moved to the dining room where my mother had outdone herself: meatloaf, garlic mashed potatoes, and an elaborate Caesar salad. As we settled into our seats, the familiar family dynamic reasserted itself immediately. My father dominated the conversation, talking about recent construction contracts and a potential expansion into Wisconsin. "We just secured the Johnson account," my father announced, serving himself a second helping of meatloaf. $12 million project, biggest of the quarter." "That's wonderful, dear," my mother said. "Jake put together the final presentation," my father added proudly. "Showed real business instinct." Jake straightened in his chair, basking in the praise. "Just applied what you taught me, Dad." I waited for a natural pause in the conversation, heart racing slightly. "I actually have some news too," I said, reaching for the folder beside my plate. "I've made a breakthrough in my research." My father's expression didn't change. "Oh, another paper published in some journal nobody reads?" I pushed past the sting of his words. "Actually, it's much bigger than that. I've developed a method to stabilize quantum entanglement at room temperature. The university is filing patents." 3 blank faces stared back at me. "What does that mean in English?" Jake asked. I took a deep breath. "It means I've solved one of the biggest problems in quantum technology. Computers thousands of times faster than current ones. Unbreakable encryption. Medical imaging that could detect diseases at the cellular level before symptoms appear." My father set down his fork. "And this makes money how, exactly?" "The Technology Transfer Office thinks it could be worth billions," I said, the words still feeling strange in my mouth. "Companies like IBM, Google, the Department of Defense, they're all investing heavily in quantum technology." My father laughed. It wasn't a warm laugh. "Billions for your little experiment, Grace? Be realistic." My father's dismissive tone cut through me like ice. "I am being realistic," I insisted, pulling out the preliminary documents. "Here's the patent application. The university is already fielding inquiries from tech companies." He glanced at the papers without really looking at them, then passed them to my mother, who set them aside without reading them. "Your little experiment is worthless," he declared flatly. "If you want to make real money, you should have gone into business like your brother." The dismissal hit harder than I'd expected. Even with everything I'd accomplished, nothing had changed. I excused myself to use the bathroom, needing a moment alone to compose myself. As I walked down the hallway, I heard my father's voice from the dining room, unusually animated. Curious, I paused near the doorway. "Jake, call David tomorrow," my father was saying quietly. "Tell him we may have something interesting for quantum dynamics after all." "You think her research is legitimate?" Jake asked. "Doesn't matter," my father replied. "David's been looking to acquire intellectual property in quantum computing. If the university is filing patents, there must be something to it. We can position ourselves as early investors." My blood ran cold. David Harrison was my father's college buddy who now ran Quantum Dynamics, a tech company known for acquiring and sometimes burying competing technologies. And my father was planning to sell my research without even telling me. I returned to the dining room, trying to mask my shock. As I sat down, my father reached beside his chair and pulled out a leather portfolio I hadn't noticed before. "Actually, Grace, I had some paperwork drawn up," he said casually, extracting several documents. "Since you mentioned your research last week on the phone, I thought this might be the perfect opportunity for the family business to diversify into technology." I hadn't mentioned my research on the phone. The realization hit me, he'd been planning this before I even arrived. Someone at the university must have told him about my breakthrough. "These papers would establish Mitchell Family Holdings as the commercial entity representing your intellectual property," he continued, sliding the documents across the table. "We'd handle all the negotiations, marketing, and business development. You could focus on your research without worrying about the commercial aspects." "You want me to sign over my rights?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. "It's a family partnership," he corrected smoothly. "We'd manage the business side, which you have no experience with. Jake would serve as CEO of the new division." Jake had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable, but said nothing. "We're offering a 70-30 split," my father continued. 70% to Mitchell Holdings, 30% to you, considering you'd have no responsibilities beyond technical consultation. "That's generous." I stared at the contract in disbelief. Not only was he trying to take control of my work, but he was offering me less than a third of its value while making my brother, who knew nothing about quantum physics, the CEO. "I need time to think about this," I said carefully. "What's there to think about?" my father pressed. "You've never had any head for business, Grace." "This way, the whole family benefits," my father continued, his tone growing more insistent. My mother finally spoke up. "Your father knows what's best, dear. He's just trying to help you." In that moment, I realized how deep the betrayal went. This wasn't just about my father's controlling nature. This was a coordinated effort to take advantage of my work while I was still vulnerable, before the full value was established. The three of them, my family, had discussed this plan without me. "I'm not signing anything tonight," I said firmly, standing up. "I need to consult with the university's legal team first." My father's expression hardened. "Don't be difficult, Grace. This is a good deal. Most scientific research never makes a penny." "Then you shouldn't be interested in worthless experiments," I replied, gathering my documents. As I walked toward the door, my father called after me. "Think carefully before you turn this down. I have connections at Stanford. One call about family financial interest in your research could complicate those patent applications." The threat hung in the air as I left that perfect family dinner, shattered by naked greed and betrayal. Just as I reached my Honda Accord in the driveway, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced at the screen and felt my heart skip a beat. It was an email from Martin Weber with the subject line, "Patent approved, urgent news." I opened it quickly, my hands shaking as I read the brief but life-changing message. The patent examiner had given our application special priority due to its groundbreaking nature. Preliminary approval had been granted, the fastest in the department's history. And most importantly, major tech companies were already bidding. Google's starting offer, $1 billion for licensing rights. $1 billion for my worthless experiment. I stood there in the driveway, staring at my phone screen, as everything clicked into place. The timing wasn't coincidental. My father hadn't just been trying to claim ownership, he'd known this was coming. Someone had leaked information about the impending approval. I turned back toward the house, where I could see my family through the dining room window, still sitting around the table. My father was gesturing animatedly to Jake and my mother, probably explaining his brilliant business strategy. They had no idea that in the few minutes since I'd left the table, everything had changed. For the first time in my life, I saw my father not as the intimidating figure who had shaped my childhood fears, but simply as a man whose power over me existed only because I had allowed it. The scared little girl who had spent years seeking his approval was gone, replaced by a woman who understood her own worth. I walked back into the house, my phone clutched in my hand like a weapon. The shift in the room was immediate when I entered. My father's expression changed from confident to wary as I placed my phone on the table, screen facing up. "What's that?" he demanded. "Patent approval," I replied calmly. "Preliminary, but official. And the first bid for licensing rights." I paused, letting the moment stretch. $1 billion. His face went through a series of emotions: disbelief, shock, then calculation. He reached for my phone, but I pulled it back. "That's impossible," he said. "Patents take months, sometimes years." "Not when they represent a fundamental breakthrough in quantum technology," I countered. "The examiner expedited it personally." Jake leaned forward. "$1 billion from who?" "Google, for starters. And they're just the first bidder." I turned to my father. "Interesting timing, isn't it? Just as you're asking me to sign away my rights." My father recovered quickly. "This only confirms what I've been saying about the value of proper business management. Without our family's resources behind you." "I achieved this without your help," I interrupted, my voice steady. "In fact, I succeeded despite your constant discouragement." "You're being dramatic," he scoffed. "I always supported your education." "You supported what you could control," I corrected him. "The moment I chose my own path, you withdrew that support. And now that my path has led to success, you want to claim ownership." My mother spoke up tentatively. "Grace, your father is just trying to protect you. Business negotiations can be very complicated." "Is that what he told you this is about?" I asked her directly. "Protection, not control or personal gain?" She didn't answer, but her eyes flickered toward my father uncertainly. "Did you know," I continued, addressing her, "that Dad has been promised a board position at Quantum Dynamics if this deal goes through? This isn't about family interest. It's about his ambition." My father's face hardened. "That's enough. The fact remains that without proper representation, you'll be exploited by these tech companies. You need us." "No," I said firmly. "I don't." Over the next year, I watched my worthless experiment transform into Williams Quantum Technologies, a company valued at over $2 billion. The licensing deals with major tech companies brought in hundreds of millions in revenue, funding breakthrough research that would benefit humanity for generations. My relationship with my family slowly healed, but on new terms. Jake eventually earned a position at my company through merit, not nepotism. My mother rediscovered her own professional ambitions, starting a financial consulting practice. And my father, after a minor heart attack forced him to confront his mortality, finally admitted he'd been wrong. "I wanted to control everything," he confessed during a quiet moment at his hospital bedside. "Business, family, legacy. I thought I knew best." "We all have blind spots, Dad," I replied. He nodded thoughtfully. "Your mother points out mine more frequently these days." The quantum technology that nearly tore my family apart eventually became the catalyst for a healthier relationship, one based on mutual respect rather than authority, on earned trust rather than obligatory loyalty. What experience in your life taught you to trust your own judgment over others' opinions? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes the most important signature isn't on a contract, it's the one you put on your own self-worth. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you always recognize the value of your unique contributions to the world.